screen, and despite the whole running a games company, you'd think I'd be good at technology, but let's have a
You
look.
should have a button right in the middle called present now at the bottom.
So can you see that? That should be my PowerPoint slide.
Yeah.
So that's full screen now?
I see the PowerPoint, so not the slideshow. No.
I'm sharing the window, not the screen.
Yeah, I can see the window.
Yeah. Entire screen. This one. Share. Okay. Is that full screen?
Yeah, it is.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay. So, yeah, how to make the most out of a game jam. That is the kind of crux of this talk. That's the whole point of what we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to sort of run you guys through two parts. For one, it is sort of just how we got our start, how we got to where we are. And then for two, it's how to get through a game jam healthily and successfully and actually properly build out something meaningful and significant. Because I, of all people, definitely know that it is so easy to just completely annihilate yourself during a game jam. And ironically, if you do that, you won't get your best work out of it. So yeah, we'll go through both of those, and then we've got time for questions at the end. So for context as to who I am running Moss Monkey, like I said, and this is our title. So we're working on a game called Outlaw. It is a third-person action adventure along the lines of like Spyro and Banjo-Kazooie, but with a twist of minion management. So think games like Pikmin or Overlord, any games where you have one guy commanding a bunch of little dudes. That's our bread and butter. So you play as Giblet, the little cat in the middle. He is a five-eyed magic cat from space, and he is able to create and control these little shadow kittens called Shades, which you can see all around him there. You use them to fight enemies, solve puzzles, explore these interesting, wondrous worlds, as we call them, and just sort of get up to mischief. Our design mentality is summarized by the fact that you don't open doors, you break windows. So that should give you all you need to know about the general gameplay flow. We've seen a fair bit of success from it so far. We started in January, and we are still running to this day. We are currently all full-time on the UK Games Fund grant, and we're looking for more funding come the end of February to allow us to keep going. So basically, first things first, you want to get a team together. But the point I want to make is that whichever team you get together for this game jam, any other game jams, any other projects that you have, it doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be ready to go right from the start. So Moss Monkey and Outlaw were not planned from the start at all. This is what we were working on beforehand. Can you see my mouse? That might be useful for pointing to things.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, me, Iz, and Zach were sort of the starting little kernel of what would later become Moss Monkey. We worked together on the Make It Manifesto Jam, which was a September thing at university, on this title called Vroomba. The idea of Vroomba was it was a racing game where you play as Roombas racing around a house, and the more you go over the same bit of track, the cleaner it gets and the faster you can go. Which was a fun idea, and we thought we might want to take it forward, but we kind of realized that it didn't quite hit all the beats that we wanted it to. So like Zach wanted to do more character focused stuff, Iz wanted to do something with a bit more narrative. I wanted a bit more of a like design challenge beyond just racing game. So we decided to put that on hold and see where we could go next. So then Louis, Sam, Beth, and Ryder were another group that were working on like sort of a prototype for a survival game. And me and Iz had worked with Louis in the Global Game Jam that year, and Zach had worked with Sam. So there were some pre-existing connections there, and we knew that we worked well together. We knew that the other group was good at what they do. So we went over and just kind of said, hey, do you want to work with us in our final project? Do we want to see what we can combine our forces together and produce? They said yes, and then later on in March or February-ish, we brought Jake onto the team, who had also worked with, I think, Ryder in the previous Global Game Jam. So if nothing else, the Global Game Jam contributed the connections that made our team in the first place. But the point is, we didn't do the global as that team. We did the global as a bunch of other people, and then those connections later became relevant. And that's kind of how game jams work. You just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, connections, ideas, people, all those kinds of things. Don't throw people at a wall. That's a bad idea. But you kind of try a bunch of different things, and eventually some of them become relevant, and it's usually in ways you wouldn't even expect. So to move on from here, I just want to kind of give you guys a little bit of a clarification. This is the team at Moss Monkey. So this is the slide we present to like publishers and investors. This is how we pitch ourselves as like a group of people who are good at what they do and know how to do it, type of thing. And all of this information is true. This is who we are. However, and I'll send these slides after the presentation so you guys can have a pick through them and look at the details a bit further. But the important thing is that this is also us. And I want to make that like crystal clear, because something that I've come across doing this talk a few times at like university and other things in the past is that it can be really easy for everything we've done to be presented as like this monolith of achievement off in the distance of like, oh, these guys started a successful game studio. We run out of money in February. We have no idea what we're doing. We just kind of have enough faith in ourselves to work it out while we're on the way, and that's the important thing. So that's the kind of energy that I would recommend taking into a game jam like this. Embrace the weird, silly stuff, because the game jams are like the best place to experiment and play with all of those kinds of things. Because at the end of the day, if it all goes wrong and you don't hit a dead end, then you just put it in a box and do something else, right? So moving on from there, after you have found a team, you want to find where to start. So this is an example here of a business plan I made at the end of 2023 to like plan out where I wanted the company to go and what I was thinking of doing in terms of like market research and legal stuff. And like, there's a whole bunch of information in here. And it was a good idea to kind of get myself familiar with the topics, but that's how much of it's usable today. And of that, like the first little chunk is like my name and my email, which hasn't changed. The second chunk is like competitor market research, which won't have changed. That's just like Nintendo exists and makes games. Crazy that. And then like a few of the other ones are like, this is how much Photoshop costs. Again, that's unlikely to fluctuate all too much. So planning is great and has a place, but I think as game developers and especially like technically minded people, we have a sort of susceptibility to, I guess, like over plan and overthink things and go like, oh, we've got to, you know, get all the ducks in a row, make sure we know what we're doing beforehand. My encouragement, especially in game jams, is just don't do that if you can possibly bring yourself to it. Like, you're going to get so much more out of game jams and just projects in general in the tech space and the design space if you just kind of just do stuff, right? Like, just go, oh, I want to learn this, and throw yourself into an hour-long tutorial video that you don't understand half the terms of, because it's going to be messy and you're going to hit a lot of dead ends and it's going to be frustrating in places, but you learn so much quicker than you would otherwise. And the churn of ideas it generates is like second to none. It's one of the fastest ways you can improve your own discipline that I have found, is just kind of not really stopping and not kind of worrying about the particulars of the things you make. Inevitably, if you come across an idea that is worth planning, it'll make that fact clear while you're working on it. No sort of masterwork is created from the ground up right from the beginning with a blank slate and then starting with measurements. It's like begins as a napkin sketch and then you go, okay, well, that's worth putting a bit more time into, and that's when you start to plan things. So that's step 2. And leading on to that, step 3, very appropriately, is just stop talking, start doing things. I've essentially covered this point already in the previous slide, but that bottom line especially is one I want to emphasize. You'll work out where you're going when you're on your way there, but you're never going to go anywhere if you sit still and worry about which way you should start walking, right? It's a heck of a lot easier to understand what's going on from just a few different viewpoints. But if you sit still and don't allow yourself all of those other viewpoints, you're not really going to move anywhere. So that's step 3. Here is some evidence of that. This is all stuff that we made as part of our project. This was all of our initial exploration and like things that we wanted to mess with. And I just want to emphasize that while like a lot of this I could pick at and be like, okay, that was useful, like this mechanic, this idea, all of this got into the final project. The thing I want to emphasize is that none of this looks like the thing we're doing nowadays. None of this is the same art style, the same mechanical direction, the same, I mean, even humor in the sense of the joke on the bottom left. It's all changed, but we wouldn't be where we're at right now if we hadn't done all of this stuff at the start and then used it as a springboard. So going from there, the other thing I want to emphasize on top of like just put a team together and do stuff without like bothering to plan as much in the context of a game jam is don't do it alone. Of course, that means your teammates, but it also means just people around you, right? Like you guys are on TechEd's course, so you have by nature a bunch of people who know assumedly a bit more than you in certain like specialisms and subject areas. So lean on that knowledge while it's around and take that practice into every other situation. So for example, in the Fuel Studios offices where TechEd is based, I think I've spotted a few of you about, we're based in there. So is Newfangled Games, which is a game studio that's been running for about 5 years now, and they're very, very successful. They've got games on Netflix. They're up for a few BAFTA nominations. So are Glowfrog Games, who are getting started at around the same kind of rate as us. They're looking for more funding around February too. They're making a cute little game about like scrapbooking and putting together memories and working out the story of a person through that. If anyone's played Unpacking, it's kind of a similar vibe. There's TVM, who are making like a Baroque horror woodland creature game. And also there's like a whole bunch of other people in the building alone who do tech related stuff. So the thing I want to make a point of is that line at the bottom, be annoying. Obviously don't like shred someone's willpower, but I find myself at least susceptible to the thought that like, oh, I would really like to talk to that person or ask them this thing, or I know if this is possible, but I don't want to intrude or like interrupt or kind of exist in space that I haven't been in before. And so for a fair few years while I was at university, I didn't do that. And then at some point, I think it was around the end of COVID when I realized that the university was getting back up and running so slowly that there was no way of engaging with it other than like just sort of going and using the facilities even when you weren't told to and engaging with the lecturers. But something clicked where I just started doing stuff. Like if I wanted to know something from a lecturer, I would go and ask them or shoot them an email, which is a fairly typical university experience. But then, like, for example, other things, I realized that most universities, for example, deal with a shortage of kind of attendance in a lot of lectures because a lot of people are either used to being online or et cetera, et cetera. And NUA was incredibly susceptible to that. So basically every workshop, every lecture would welcome extra guests even if they weren't part of the specialism or part of the year. So if I saw a talk I was interested in, I'd just go. And it takes a bit of sort of awareness to not push this too far to the point that you genuinely do tick people off. But my advice is learn to do that, because once you have, it's one of the most valuable skills you can get. Just the ability to like find someone who has knowledge or experience, or even like it says there, equipment or space that would be helpful to you, and just being able to go up and start talking about that and start asking those questions and begin those conversations. If there is someone you want to talk to, or the extreme likelihood, unless they're actually secretly someone you don't want to talk to, is that they will be willing to sit down and have a conversation with you. And so to start that off, for example, I'm just going to say now, if any of you do see me or any of Moss Monkey around at the offices or near TechEd, you are all more than welcome to just come up and start a conversation and ask about anything on this talk or anything related to games or anything else, really. And for example, from that, there's a few people in third year at uni right now that a few of us at Moss Monkey are mentoring, because they did that after we gave a talk there. They walked up and said, hey, we're working on a group project like you. Can we sit down once a month and have mentorship sessions? And we just went, yeah, that sounds great. Go for it, is the long and short. Going from there, here are some pictures for evidence for that point. So we're a team of 8, like I said, and we've been to a bunch of different events and we've done a bunch of different things. But on top of that, all of these events we found our way to by leaning on other connections and asking other people external to the team about things. So going like left to right, top to bottom, the Norwich Games Festival we heard about through university, and we got in contact with the organizers after the applications for showcasing had closed. And just because we asked and we said, hey, we're a bit late to the game, but we've just sort of started our studio, we've got a game we'd like to showcase, can we have a table anyway? The answer was yes. We got showcasing, and after that, on the third day, we had ended up at Newfangled's launch party for Paper Trail the night before. And so from seeing the aftermath of that party, shall we say, we had a pretty good guess that Newfangled wouldn't necessarily be showcasing the day after. So we shot a few questions around, and we got a thumbs up from them and from the organizers to move our stuff to their table, which was right at the front in about the best possible location it could have been. And so we essentially took it from, oh no, the festival's closed, we can't showcase, to sat in front of the door on the biggest table there going, well, that worked quite well. Going on from there, it's like there's Norfolk Game Developer meetups. They happen on the final Tuesday of every month, I believe. And then there's sort of smaller social things at various games cafes. If you just look up like Norfolk Game Developers, you'll find a few different things there. There's a meeting this evening at Albion Games Cafe, which I'd recommend going to. Unfortunately, we're not going to be there because we've got an external event that we need to go to this evening on top of it. But then there's another one on the 28th, I believe. So definitely look into that. Then, yeah, Barclays Game Frenzy, Develop, the Norwich Science Festival. All of these are events that we showcased at and learned something from. Playtesting at uni, we just basically asked the higher ups at uni if we could put a bunch of computers set up with the game on it and just ask people to come by. The answer was yes. You guys can likely do something very similar with leaning on the people that are at Fuel, because they've got a lot of technical expertise. And if you've got something you want playtested, just start asking. There's potentially something that can be done there. And then graduation is just sort of the best example of it. That's sort of the wider group that we were engaged with at university, and we're in contact with most of them to this day. They're all doing various different things now, from making TTRPGs to working AAA to some of them are still studying and masters and things like that. But it's an incredible group of people that are amazing to have as friends, and will be even better to have as like colleagues and people in the industry as time goes on. But it all starts from that just personal friendship connection. Going from there, I just want to emphasize that post-uni, we definitely were in some danger of like a slump after the structure that university provided left. I just realized down at the bottom in July transfuser, it says for Louis' birthday. That's not quite right. That was the remnant of another slide that was there when we were giving this talk at uni. But the point here is that if you've got like this project that you want to work on, or like something that you are making, or a goal that you want to, you know, aim towards, it's all well and good working on it during, like, for example, the tech ed course. But after that course finishes, the structure that started that project is going to drop away really, really quick. So same with the game jam. The game jam will provide structure to make something, but after the game jam's over, it's so easy to sit with a project that you really like and look at it and go, oh, well, I'll work on it on one day and then kind of just not. So my advice is, if you find something you like, if you find something that's worth exploring, just put as many external things immediately after it as you possibly can that drive you to getting the project done. Be it a playtesting event at Fuel Studios, or even just like promising a friend that you'll show the game to them on this date. All of these little things, and then expands to showcases and all that kind of stuff, will help you sort of aim towards a goal and work towards a deadline. Because if it's just sort of free floating and it's just kind of work on the game and that's the only goal you have, unless you're a superhuman and a stronger person than me, the great likelihood is that not all too much will get done without those motivators. And the prime example of all of this is that we started with those kind of goals, like playtesting at uni, that kind of thing. I ended up in Finland in November. I still haven't really processed that one. We're a group of 8 nerds that sat down and drew some silly cats in January, and then I'm sat on a flight to Finland in November as a direct result of it. But yeah, we went to an event called Slush to showcase and talk to investors, and it was really, really spectacularly successful, and we're likely going to get some investment at the end of February because of it. So good stuff. Going from there, one question: who has something they'd like to make? Having heard all of that, I can't quite see you guys, so let's go on to the cameras. Do like hands up or something. Got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, a fair handful. So a fair few of them, a fair few of you guys have an idea or something you'd be after, something you'd want to chase, whether it's a game or a project or a company or a website. Like, it doesn't need to be specifically tied to this game jam. Whatever it is, my advice is, from a main character of our game, oh, I've gone too far back. Oh no. Is do it. That's the long and short of it. Just kind of start doing things. You might not have the expertise you need. You might not have the skills you want. You might not have the people you need around you. All of that will come with time. That's sort of the point of game jams, is you just do things and you work out the specifics as you go. That's the one thing I want you guys to take away from this, if nothing else. So going on from there, how to run a jam properly. And this is from my limited experience, and I have not been jamming nearly as long as a lot of other people in the industry. So all of this is taken with a grain of salt, but this is just a few little bits and pieces that I've found that work quite well. Like it says down there, namely healthy working practices, because I know how easy it is to destroy yourself in an environment like this. So in terms of self-motivation, because a jam is an inherently kind of self-pushing thing, and if you don't have the drive to do it, you're likely not going to get all too far. So it's all well and good going by the mentality of like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, just kind of get it done, push through the hardship. But that gets you so far, and then you kind of just collapse. So the stuff that's worked for me is start small, just pick little things you can handle. For me, like, I make a list of stuff and I just whack the kind of items off of it as quickly as humanly possible. And I try and make it as granular as I can. because having that like self-starting list of just like, okay, we kind of sketched out an idea, we've got a rough concept of what we want to do, here's the basics that we need to start experimenting with that. As I'm building those, inevitably I come up with ideas and like all of these things, and I write a second list as I'm getting through the first one. It snowballs after that. Self-assigned tasks as well, but particularly self-assigned tasks that push you and make you uncomfortable. Game jams are like the perfect spot to try things you haven't before. So if you're like, for example, if you're a developer, maybe try some design work or some art stuff. If I've seen animators go into 3D modeling, I've seen 3D artists try their hand at sound design. Like, just have a go at anything you think might be appealing, especially if it's something you've not done before or you look at and go, I don't know how to do that. That's the kind of stuff you want. And then, yeah, the one that works for me like amazingly is surround yourself with accountability. The routine thing is less applicable for game jams, but check-ins regularly over the course of the jam and just have people around you that, like, the key bit is that are interested in what you're doing, because that's the best accountability you can ever have. Is it's all well and good if you've got like a teacher or an authority figure looking over your shoulder and going, oh, are you meeting the deadlines? Are you doing this on time? Blah, 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 blah. But if you've got like a friend who gets really hype when you talk about your project and gets really excited, that's the best accountability you can have, because you're going to want to work to that. You're going to want to make that person proud. You're going to want to do things that repeat that feeling that you've clearly visibly generated in someone else. So work out what kind of accountability works for you and just put as much of it around you as you can for the duration of the jam. Going from there, this is a slide that personally means a lot to me, and who is the one in the picture on the right there. We both founded Moss Monkey together, and we've both been through very similar journeys in our personal lives, where we've grown up as like the weird kids at school who were interested in D&D and computers and all the nerdy stuff. And we've watched that, as I'm sure many of you guys have, become cool over time as we've grown up. And so the point I want to make here is basically those three things on a side. No one actually knows what they're doing. If you know why you want to do it, that's essentially enough. And then don't be ashamed of who you are. Most of us, if we're in the tech space, are probably interested in some like niche stuff, be it, you know, like I said, D&D or Star Wars is another big one, or TV, any of that kind of stuff, like movies, anime, like all this fringe stuff is where we thrive, and it's where ideas that no one else will really put together come from. Like the best projects, the best artistic works that I've ever seen, the best technical creations I've ever seen, come from people with interesting and complex world experiences, combining those ideas together. So like a brief example, one of my favorite world building projects that I'm engaged with right now is being run by an artist who has a background as a paleontologist and a Christian. And he has taken essentially the story of the flood and Noah's Ark and gone, what if the world as it was before the flood was a setting for a story? And it's so cool because it's like this interesting, like culturally diverse world full of giant things and like dinosaurs and people and like all of this different stuff. It's called Dead Gods on YouTube if you want to go look it up. But that combination of experiences isn't something that many other people would have produced. And if it's something that the guy would have shunned away from or avoided, then it never would have been made. So work out the things that make you you and chase them and put them into everything you make, because no one else is going to do it. And that's the long and short of it. Then communicate or suffer. I forgot that Iz wrote this one. It does what it says on the tin, basically. If you don't communicate with your teammates and people and the fellow developers and everything else, like all the time, projects just fall apart. This is especially relevant in like university environments where people are still learning to communicate to other people, let alone in a professional setting. I imagine you guys probably have a better handle on it than most university students, but regardless, it still applies. Once you've found your teammates, once you've found your people, when you're working together on a game jam, you just tell everyone everything all the time. It doesn't matter what. For example, one thing that happened in the team recently is one of the team members went through a pretty significant life event regarding their family. And for a brief moment, they were averse to talking about it in work environments because they didn't want to put a burden on other people. And the overwhelming consensus from the rest of the team was, we're a team, we're a group of people that are spending time around each other a lot. Life events are going to happen during that. No obligation, but you're always welcome to talk to us. And that's what you need to bring into game jams. Just that mentality of open, available communication, and like being receptive to crit as well, like criticism. If someone brings up some adjustment to your work, the best thing you can do is sit there, process it, listen to it, and take it as if it's like gospel while they're explaining it to you. And then once you've heard them out completely, sit there and pick it apart and go, okay, I don't necessarily agree with this, but that makes sense. If communication is open on their end as well, you'll be able to bring points back to them and go, well, okay, this doesn't make sense. I'm going to keep that the same, but this, yeah, that's a very good point. Go from there. And right at the bottom, again, just a reinforcement, ask questions all the time to everyone. And the bottom bit there, Columbo everyone, especially Ian, that came from our time at university where my nickname in class was Columbo. I don't know if anyone here has seen the detective show, but it's essentially featuring a main character called Columbo, and he's this like sort of bumbling everyman detective that gets by and solves crimes just by being a normal guy and asking a whole bunch of questions. His whole thing is that like, as it seems that the villain has got away and the murder suspect has left, he just turns around and goes, oh, one more thing, and runs after them and brings them back in. And I would do that all the time in lectures, non-stop. Just one more thing, I've got one more question. And so Ian, our lecturer, gave me that nickname, and I wear it with a badge of pride. So ask questions to everyone constantly. After that, work-life balance. This applies in life, but my God, it applies in game jams. If this is anyone's first game jam, you're likely going to be tempted to sort of basically can everything else going on at the time to make the most of the limited time frame. And that was what I did at first as well. But you're going to make a hell of a lot more use of the time if you keep yourself fed and keep yourself on a sleeping schedule and keep yourself fueled and working properly, rather than pulling all-nighters, rather than skipping meals. All of that makes the quality of your work worse. And it just means that you're going to be having to put out fires as you make them for basically the back half of the project. So make sure you have hobbies, make sure you learn how to switch off, make sure you engage in all of them. And God, do I know that that's hard, especially as an adult. Like, I understand that. But in a game jam environment, those things are going to be your lifeline. And if you throw yourself entirely 100% into your work, you're not, at minimum, like in the best case scenario, you're going to have a successful game jam, and then you're going to need to basically just vegetate for like a week afterwards. If you're wanting to go at this as like a sustainable project that you might want to take somewhere else, make sure you have a balance. If you're wanting to not just shred your own consciousness, make sure you got a balance. It is so important. It might seem like I'm sort of stating the obvious here, but like I said, as someone who has been really susceptible to this in the past, it's not worth it. Yeah, that's the long and short of it. Going from there, know your limits. A good example here, the sketch on the right was supposed to be a full piece of art, but our character artist couldn't finish it in time for the presentation. And instead of pushing through beyond working hours, the answer was just, don't, it'll do. It actually works quite well for the slide. So the points, the important bits here are essentially threefold, like the others. Overscoping and perfectionism, massive issues. Like I've said in the whole rest of this talk, be messy, make stuff you're not happy with, make stuff that you're uncomfortable doing. Just push yourself into areas that you don't know the lay of, and make peace with the fact that you're probably going to mess stuff up in the process. Because if you try and make a good thing or a great thing or a like perfect thing every single time you engage in a project, again, in the best case scenario, you're going to sit there and repeatedly make the same thing perfectly over and over again for the rest of your life. To learn, you need to do stuff and mess it up and make the wrong thing and kind of just cock it up, I guess. So yeah, make sure you push yourself out of your comfort zone and don't kind of force yourself into this box of, this is what I have to do, this is what I've got to do. So that's knowing your limits and knowing how to sit kind of outside of them in terms of skill and comfort. But then in terms of your limits regarding like timescales and workload, just sort of check in with yourself very regularly and go like, okay, here's the current scope of the jam or the project or whatever it is. Can I get that done realistically? If the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is maybe, have a look at it further. If the answer is no, that's absolutely fine. If you get through a whole project without the answer being no at any given point, do you want to swap places? I'm interested to hear what you have to say. But yeah, so check in with yourself, with your teammates, make sure your workload is manageable, make sure you can get done what you need to get done, because the worst thing that can happen in a game jam like this isn't someone dropping out, isn't someone saying, I can't do this anymore. It's someone saying, yes, I can do that, and then not doing it without saying anything. It's happened so many times to me in game jams before, where a teammate's shown up and really enthusiastic, gone, yeah, I'll take on all of these jobs, all of these tasks. And then we get like a day or two in, we're at the point where we can put all the pieces together and we're expecting something to come from over that way. We check in and they go, didn't do it, sorry. And so then we go, right, great. If we knew that from the start, we could have planned for this. If we knew that from when you knew that, we could have planned for this. Now we're in a really difficult situation. So make sure you're open and honest about what you can and can't do and what you have the capacity for at any given time. And then finally, don't be precious about ideas and concepts. So game jams are fantastic for this, but a lot of the time you'll find that ideas you have don't necessarily get stuck in a game jam or apply. If that's the case, and if you think the idea has legs, write it down, do it some other time. But inevitably with a game jam, you're going to have among the team a whole bunch of ideas for the game right at the start. You're only ever going to be able to make one of them. That's the best example of it. So make sure you are comfortable with coming up with ideas, talking to people about them, and then looking at them and going, okay, not right now, but later, because I like that idea type of thing. So that's that slide. And then beyond that, a brief little point to kind of finish off about funding. So past game jams, past like education, past professional settings, this is what we're dealing with right now. And basically, to read this verbatim, it is entirely possible to make a ridiculous amount of money from games. You make a mobile game, ram it full of advertisements, ram it full of predatory microtransactions, market it to kids and pensioners who don't know any better, and ream a bunch of cash off of parents' credit cards. It's stunningly easy. Like, the more you get involved with the games industry, the more you will realize that this is an entirely accessible option. However, the guess is that most people here on some level won't want to do that all the way. It is, I want to emphasize this, a valid part of the industry that a lot of people have built livelihoods for their families and their environment, just their like personal lives off of. I would question the bit where you are marketing it to kids and pensioners, but mobile games, games with advertisements, games with microtransactions aren't inherently a bad thing. You've just got to know where you sit on the line with it. For me, personally, the studio that we're making is based around the idea of healthy working environments, of You buy a game, you get a game of worthwhile stories and interesting things that promote connections among people, and that's our driving principle. That's not going to be everyone's driving principle. That's all right, but just make sure you're honest with yourself and you know where you sit on it, because if you get that wrong, you're never going to be happy with your discipline until you change that. Having said that, even though there isn't piles and piles of money in the artistic indie dev storytelling aspect of the games industry, I would wager that most people here share a common understanding that there is something that is worth it anyway, despite that. For me, it's this. This is a small little photo collage of my memories from the past year or so. This is trips to London. This is random B&Bs with a group of people I am lucky to call my colleagues and fortunate to call my friends. This is adventure and artistic expression and wonder and human connection and a feeling that I'm actually putting something into the world that is worthwhile. All of these things that I am able to sort of chase right now in the situation I'm in, so long as rent and bills can be paid and I can have food on my table. I appreciate that's not going to be the case for absolutely everyone, but I would be willing to bet that most people here can see the appeal in some way of surrounding yourself with a group of people you really get along with, making something you're passionate about, and being able to proudly call it your living. There's a sort of shine to that, whoever you are, in a lot of places. So having said that, past Global Game Jams. All of that is to say, I just want to emphasize the point, I've done the Global Game Jam twice. That's not that many times compared to you guys. I'm going to be doing it for the third time this year with a lot of Moss Monkey at my back, and we've come a hell of a long way since 2023 when me, Louis, and Iz sat down and made Foundation. But the point I want to make is that you guys ain't far behind. I'm willing to bet that a few of you will probably have experience in the games industry already. A few of you will probably have some pre-existing knowledge in maybe tech spaces or anything else. Even if you don't, you're starting in the same position I did. When I went to university, literally all I knew was that I liked to draw and I liked to make characters. And I thought I was going to be a concept artist for a while. But in the 3 years I was there, I found coding, I found indie development, I found people that I got along with, and I went, oh, hang on, all of this is pretty cool. And I stuck with it. And the result is where I'm sat today. But the point that I want to make and that I want to leave on is that that is entirely accessible and entirely possible for any of you guys, along with all of the other alternative pathways that were also open. Just got to go chase them. Having said that, time for questions. So that QR code will take you to our Linktree, which is just kind of a general page that has our like Steam page, our Instagram, LinkedIn, Discord, all that kind of thing. I end every talk with this little clarification. Our Steam page currently has a demo up just to play. So if you want to have a go at the game, feel free. The current single thing that anyone can do to help us the most is hit wishlist on our game on Steam, because we're currently trying to talk to publishers in order to get proper funding for the full project. And that metric, that number of wish lists on Steam, is one of the biggest things that they look at in order to decide whether a project is worth it. So genuinely every single one of those goes a mile towards helping us. So if you got anything out of the talk, if you appreciated hearing from us, would be very, very gracious if you would be willing to hit that button. So having said all of that, I'm going to pop back over to the camera screens and stop sharing. And yeah, questions, what we got? Go for it.
A lot for that. That was really insightful.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I've got quite a few, but you did cover a few of them. But yeah, like obviously building a team kind of helped, because I'm sort of wondering about that. But basically, what would you say the first 3 months would look like for a startup?
Ooh, okay, so for a startup in general, is it a bit of a cop-out answer to say almost anything? Like, it wildly depends on the group of people, the starting point, the experience. For us, it was basically a group of people who kind of knew how to make games, sitting down and going, okay, let's do this properly. I didn't know how to run a business. Zach didn't know how to animate. Iz didn't know how to run social media. So for us, the first 3 months was basically all of us just going, okay, what skills are we missing? How do we get them? Because we were at university and we had that space to explore. For other startups, for people who are already in the industry or sort of in that educational setting, a lot of people, it'll be a matter of like the first thing you want to go to is getting the idea with a group of friends and making like a little presentation of it to then send off to grant boards or funding boards or anything else to get that initial bit of funding. Beyond that, again, some people may be fortunate enough to be in a situation where they already have some savings or some money they can live off of. So at that point, it's just take those savings, find a team, go, let's get on it, and put something together. Ideally, you want a demo and a pitch deck. Those are like the two key bits that you want to chase in games first. And that's essentially, the demo is practical showcase. You can just kind of go, here it is, to an investor or anything else. And the pitch deck is the theoretical showcase. So that's like, here's our plans, here's our financial forecasts, all of that kind of thing. And you have both of those, in good order, you'll be sitting fairly pretty in order of getting the studio up and running. But yeah, short answer, it depends, which is a bit of a cop-out, but
that's fine. Thanks for that.
Not a problem.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Online calls. Hi.
I was wondering, like what funding did you get to support the project?
Okay, so real quick, the best answer I can give with that is that I'll get up our pitch deck because it's got a breakdown of where we're sat with funding right now. And then I'll share the screen there. Where is it? There we go. So this was our pitch deck that got sent off recently to Outer Sloth, which, if you guys have come across them, they're the guys that made Among Us and like the Henry Stickmin collection. They got a ridiculous amount of money from Among Us and all of those kinds of things. And so they've made a fund to fund like little indie devs and that kind of thing. So we sent off an application to them recently, and this was in our application. So this is the short of it. Around October, we managed to secure £10,000 from the Norwich City Council for a Barclays Eagle Labs Founders Fund. That's basically like geared towards keeping businesses in the city centre for Norwich. Because we are all not from here and we would all move out if we didn't have this job, we had a pretty good case for ourselves in terms of actually going for that grant. We had about £3,000 from like friends and family chipping in and existing savings from the team just to kind of get things moving. The big one was £25,000 from the UK Games Fund, which we got from Transfuser, which is a scheme run by the UK government with the goal of essentially getting students and people recently graduated from educational institutions to start their own business. So I think you guys can apply for it after your course. I'll see if I can get up real quick. I'll just stop sharing my screen and get a different document. Oh, it was nice and easy to hand. But so the funding journey essentially went, let's go like this, like this. There we are. So yeah, the funding journey went that we applied to Transfuser in April. So while we were still at university, seeing it as like a good accessible funding option for us to start. As part of that scheme, you get $7,500 over the summer to get you started. And then it all culminates in going up to Dundee, Scotland to pitch to the UK Games Fund, which is a kind of just general board in the UK that kind of helps finance games projects and keep things afloat. They've got two funds. They've got the Prototype Fund and the Content Fund. Content Fund is for pre-established companies going into new IP. Prototype is for like brand new stuff. You can theoretically apply to it with just like a pitch deck, and that's it. And that's what we won. So that's the £25,000 that we won. We also went to EGX with them. And then this is an actual video of me 2 minutes after I opened the email telling us that we got £25,000. As you can tell, I was quite excited. But yeah, so these three plus the £7,500 from Transfuser total to about £45,000, sort of just under £50,000. And that's where we're sat right now. Since November, we've been full-time. I'm going to be entirely honest with you guys, on not very much in terms of money. We are sort of barely scraping minimum wage, but it's enough to pay our rent and put food on our plate, and we're all on the same wage. So we're all just sort of toughing it out until we get further funding, potentially from Outer Sloth, potentially from another publisher, potentially from investors. But that's what we've earned to date. That's what's sustaining us now. And the hope is that we can get money in through crowdfunding, through investment, through a publisher, or through more grants at some point in the future. I've been planning for a while to put together a pack of like links of all of these useful funding sources to send to university. I'll also get it across to you guys if any of you want to have a look at that at any point. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah. Cool. We had another one, didn't we, somewhere? Was it Titch?
Yeah, that's me. When you're faced with like multiple promising ideas, how do you prioritize which one to pursue first, especially when you're looking for longevity and you've got your other ideas that are like bigger stories and what have you? Do you like pick one that the team is most comfortable with, or do you try and have like one of these smaller projects as breathers between your bigger ones?
So that's an excellent question. Doubly so for me personally, because I am a magpie. Like when it comes to my personal practice, I'm just going, oh, shiny, and then like chasing something new every 5 minutes. And that works delightfully for me in terms of hobbies. So like, I mean, just looking around my room, we've got plants, there's origami, there's prop making over there, there's like some little kind of model painting stuff, there's actual paintings down that way. Like I've just kind of ended up doing a whole bunch of different bits, but it's not as easy to flip between things, like you say, in a professional environment. And so the short answer for how we got it to work was that we identified, as you correctly have, if we straddled ourselves between too many different projects all at once, it'd just disintegrate in our hands. So we went by the logic to start with that like we would find something that seemed like it would work, like enough on the surface level, and then just chase it as far as it would go. If at any point we had sat down and decided like, okay, this isn't going to work, we need to do something else, start from scratch, we would have. But if you've got that mentality, what you end up with is likely not going to be anything like what you started with, but all you need is that starting point in order to find out where you want to go. So for us, it was like, I think Sam made a mechanical demo over Christmas just for fun of like commanding a bunch of little guys like an RTS. And so we were like, okay, that'd be fun. Jake has like a goo material that he made a while ago. So what if we combine those two ideas and make a game about you're playing as a slime enemy from a dungeon and you can split little mini versions of yourself off to go and fight other creatures. That's what started things. And that's why, for example, the shades in Outlaw are made of like goo and you can shape them into different forms. But what that's taken in the actual final game is nothing like the original idea. The cat bit got added later, the space bit got added later, the magic stuff. The idea that is like fundamental to our gameplay of you can take your minions and turn them into weapons or walls or constructions originated from that slime idea, but has really nothing to do with it. So don't wait until the perfect thing comes along. Throw a bunch of stuff all in one place, look at it, just go, that one's my favorite, and then do it. And be honest with yourself as to whether that's working. You can't go all too wrong from there. Hopefully that helps.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, got a raised hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you do like get funding, do you have to eventually like pay that back when your game starts making money, or is it just like free cash or something?
This is my job, so this is an excellent question. So short answer, as with basically everything, it depends. So the funding that we have so far, the $7.5 grand from Transfuser, the 25 from the UK Games Fund, the 10 from the Norwich City Council, all of that is grant funding, which means it's just you just get given it. It's just money. You can have it. Go do the thing that you promised you would do. If you don't do the thing, you don't get the money. But there's no conditions. There's no return. Nothing like that. A lot of the time, grants will come from organizations or people that have other interests that will be paid back in some other fashion. So, for example, the UK Games Fund works under the logic that games is an industry that is very volatile, but has a lot of potential for high growth. And £25,000 isn't actually that much in terms of games investment. So if the UK government kind of just starts a few different projects every now and then here and there, eventually one of them is just going to go into a giant company. And then potentially like the next year, if they get a game out and it's a big success, the government themselves are like just reaving in like hundreds of thousands of pounds in taxes, and they've made their money back tenfold. So that's where that comes from. Another good example is we're going for the Epic Mega Grant right now, which is a grant from Epic Games because we work in Unreal. They provide money to people who are pushing the boundaries in terms of technical stuff in Unreal. And they want to do that because if a game is successful for them, they take royalties. So grants are very rarely completely free. There's usually a reason whoever it is providing the money is doing so. But for the sake of like immediate stuff, it is completely, nothing to be paid back. The other options that we are looking for are threefold, essentially. So in terms of publishing deals, the way that usually works in the games industry is that a company like Team 17 or Super Rare or Raw Fury, any of those guys, pay for a game to get made. And then in exchange, they take all of the earnings the game makes until they have got their money back. And then a percentage of the money the game makes from that point onwards, sometimes forever. It depends on the terms of the agreement. And that can go anywhere from like 70% of the money the game makes, which is a blow to a lot of studios, or it can go down to like 20%. And that all depends on how much money they put in, how risky they see the project as, all of these kinds of things, how much they've helped in terms of marketing and porting and localization, that kind of thing. But it all sort of is a bit mixy there. But the important thing is that they invest in the project itself and they take money out of the project itself. In terms of investors, like in the traditional sense, that's like Dragon's Den type of thing. So it will be people who put money into the company in exchange for a share of equity or like ownership in the company. And so they'll take 5%, 10%, 20%, and they own that much of the company, which means that either when they leave, the company has to buy back whatever that percentage is worth now, or when the company sells as a whole, they'll get that much of the sale when it happens. There's other things that are more complex in that regard, but that's the long and short of it. And so the logic there is like, I'll put this much money in for 10% of this company on the reliance that in 5 years, 10% of this company is going to be worth more than it was. So that's sort of revenue share, equity share. And then the third one is a bit more fuzzy, but in terms of like Kickstarter and crowdfunding, which is also another option that we're exploring, but we're not quite ready for yet. The big thing there is just the sort of debt you owe your community, if that's the route you chase. Because if you make a Kickstarter and you don't fulfill it, that's one of the quickest ways to just down a studio immediately. But if you make a Kickstarter and do fulfill it and everyone gets what they paid for and everyone's happy with the final product, then you're sitting very pretty. Yeah, Mighty Number 9 is a really good example. That happened. For context, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but if I remember right, Mighty Number 9 was a like spiritual successor to Mega Man that got a lot of attention on Kickstarter. And then when it was funded and released, basically everyone who funded it, like being after a Mega Man game, was not happy with the game, and the whole studio just disintegrated like ash in the wind. Kingdom Come Deliverance on the other side of that, yeah, that's another good example of something that went really well. So yeah, sort of 3 models there plus grants that are a bit less tied down. Essentially, it's kind of the case with any sort of startup. You make decisions about what you are okay with giving away, and you make calculations on like, well, this will be worth more to us than this, or et cetera, and that's different for every team, every person. But you just got to sort of, as long as you understand how it all works, you can then go and make those decisions. So yeah. Oh, go ahead, go for it. Is it Aaron?
That's Aaron.
It might be going in the chat, maybe.
There you go. Can you hear me? Sorry. This
Yeah.
So this wasn't actually my initial question, but you brought up Kickstarters and crowdfunding. Would you recommend them?
Ooh, that's a complex question. Yes, I think if I had to give a yes/no answer, they are a lot shinier on the surface than they seem. It's very easy to look at like big success stories from Kickstarter and go like, oh yeah, well, we'll do that. But the reality of a Kickstarter is that you've got to time it exactly right in the year. So like March kind of time is when you want to be doing a Kickstarter. You need about 3 months of full-time work from 2 people before you actually even hit go to have something that is likely to succeed in any way, because you've got to get the rewards sorted, you've got to set up the page, you've got to do all the marketing, all the advertising, you've got to have all your assets ready to go. So it's a hell of a lot of work to get it done. And then when it is launched, for example, the way Kickstarter works, if you don't get like sort of 30-40% of your goal within the first few days, you are just dead in the water. Like you don't get anywhere with it. So it is an amazing thing that can produce some incredible success stories if there is a dedicated community built around your project that you can lean on and draw from. But it's got to be a big community, it's got to be incredibly invested, and you've got to be able to put a hell of a lot of work in to get that money out. So it's not something that I would recommend just diving for immediately, but if it's something you're interested in, start exploring it. My first port of call as a recommendation would be, I think it's Spilt Milk Studios. I'll put a link in the chat. They're making a game called Trash Goblin. Yes, these guys. They're making a game called Trash Goblin, which is about like being a goblin in like a fantasy setting and digging through like bins and stuff to find artifacts and like fix them up in an antique shop. It's a really, really cool game, but they applied, their whole thing is that they applied to 70 publishers and got absolutely nothing. And then they did a Kickstarter and funded the whole project, like just by people hearing that pitch and going like, I want to do that. So they're like really open about their journey and like talking to people and helping people out. The people want goblins, exactly. Like yeah. the people know what they want, and what they want is goblins. Sounds like Potter getting published. 7, yeah, exactly, right. It does happen a lot of the time that there's a game that people really like, but a publisher just doesn't see it because a lot of them think very corporate in the way they work. So if you've got like that kind of community side of things, if you've got that sort of stuff that you can lean on, go for it. And I would recommend talking to, I think it's Andy or Andrew that runs Spilt Milk Studios. That you should be able to find an email either there or on LinkedIn. Shoot him a message. He is always willing to discuss their journey, and he knows a hell of a lot more than I do on that regard.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yeah.
As I say, I'm not a big fan of them personally at the moment, but obviously it's something to look into as an option, isn't it? It's always worth knowing options. But yeah, so I always find that there are a lot of board games that do that, and I don't like it because I just want to buy a board game and play it. I don't want to wait and have to pay. I don't care about special stuff. It just So actually, my actual question I was going to ask, but you kind of it was about legal stuff. How much legal stuff did you need to know before setting up? And what kind of legal stuff would you need?
Short answer, nothing. When we started, I didn't know anything like at all when it came to company law or regulations or anything else. I was lucky enough to have that time at university where I essentially could learn all of it free flow without anything really being meaningful. But like, for example, we set up the company in April. So like at minimum, that's sort of because January was kind of a nothing month of us working together as a team and learning how to just be around each other. So like 3 months of light work ended up with a company founded and like basic knowledge enough to get going. Short answer is just kind of start looking into things, start finding anyone you can get a hold of who has legal knowledge. My biggest piece of advice there is that most legal firms and most law firms have policies where they will give you a free consultation, because that's how they get a lot of their business. Someone comes in and explains their like needs and requirements and all of that kind of thing, and then they sit down and go, okay, well, sounds like you need a contractors agreement or a articles of association or a shareholders agreement. That'll be $1,500, and that's when they make their money. But you can essentially go to as many of those meetings as you want with as many legal firms as you'd like, and each one you can just sit there and ask questions. And it's a bit cheeky, but it's really useful for establishing that kind of baseline knowledge in the sort of legal space, especially if you're low on resources. So go for that.
Thanks.
Cool. I'm also just going to really quickly, I see we've got a few more questions. I'm going to adjust my curtains, otherwise I'm going to be sit here just blind in a moment. Back in just a second. But I can still hear you guys, so if you want to ask questions now, go for it.
I'll give you a second.
Thank you. All right, go for it. What we got?
Okay, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, good to listen to most of this. How dependent are you on social media in terms of your advertising?
So that's an interesting question, because fairly, but not properly. So social media was something that none of us knew what we were doing with when we started, and it takes a fair while to learn. And like me personally, I am a dinosaur when it comes to social media. I don't have most of it, and I just kind of don't get it. When I have downloaded like Instagram or other things in the past, I end up just getting stuck like scrolling for hours and hours and hours, and I just have no free time, and it's clear. So it took the team a while to get used to it. We've got a fairly stable fan base of about like 1,000 people ish across our various platforms. But the goal in the next like year, so starting from basically next week, is that we're going to be pushing into like this basically short form video space along with live streaming. So the two kind of ends of the spectrum, because that's what we've identified as like the biggest areas for growth. Good news is that in terms of like content in those spaces, it's fairly easy with what we do to make that kind of stuff. The best avenue that I've seen that is approachable and friendly to people who aren't familiar with the space is live stream or like long record just you working on your project, whatever it is. If you are a solo developer, it works really well, but just kind of put it online, because then you get people coming in a chat next to you, and you can kind of sit there and engage with people and talk about like what you're doing and answer questions, that kind of thing. You don't need to do it constantly while you're working, but like 1 day a week or so really helps. And then through that, you'll end up with like this gigantic backlog of content, which is just essentially hours and hours of you answering questions and working out what people want to know and like the interest points in your project, which you can then just cut up and do like, okay, this little 1 minute clip of me explaining how this bit of the code works was like, it got the chat interested at the time. So now I just put it on YouTube or put it anywhere else. And that's low effort, high reward, which is what most of us need for the space that we're in, because we can't be full-time content managers or social media kind of professionals. We just need something simple and easy that we can just have around. My like best advice and the like one thing that I would recommend focusing on is just sort of have enough of an online presence that when someone asks you what you do, you can give them a link and they can work out everything from there. If you've got that, you can start working on everything else from there. And if you want to build up more of a following on social media, you can, but you don't need it. There are other avenues of like funding and popularity. I mean, eventually, if you want, you make a project, it's successful enough, you get enough funding, you just pay a marketing agency 6 months before release to just do all of it for you, right? So there's multiple avenues. It's not as kind of earth-shatteringly important as a lot of people kind of treat it, is the short answer.
Are there any other questions?
I had one more. Oh,
Nope, go for it.
Go for it.
So I was wondering, like, because yeah, similarly to you, I'm one of those people who has about 5,000 interests I want to do all at the same time. So, given that, it's like, how do you, like, you know, in your team, how defined would you say the roles are, and does that work really well, or you know, do you ever get the itch to, do you wish, oh, actually, I wish I was this role, or you know, how does that all work?
So, short answer to go to, let me see if I can export our team slide as an image. I can, yippee, right. So I'll give you guys this, maybe, no. No, I can't send images in this chat. All right, give me a moment. So there we go. There. So this is the team with like our day-to-day running and the roles within that. So producer, community manager, art director, lead programmer, technical designer, character specialist, VFX specialist, 3D artist. Those are like our things. And what that means in terms of how we run the team is that those are the things that each of us has the final call on. So for example, if like Louis making a level, that level design falls under technical designer. If he's making a level and say like Sam or Jake kind of flag it up as like, oh, this bit doesn't quite flow how like I was expecting it to, or something like that. And then someone else has another opinion and Louis has a third opinion, and it kind of turns into this sort of back and forth of like, there is no clear right answer. There's just a bunch of different opinions. The way we're structured means that Louis is the one who says, right, I'm using my role. It's a level design question. We're doing it this way. And then we're able to move on and not get stuck. And so like Ryder can make calls like that in regards to art direction. Sam can make calls like that in regards to programming, on and on and on and on and on. But that doesn't mean that we're all bound to our roles specifically. So like I said earlier, I'm hopeless when it comes to nailing myself down to one thing. It's why I like being a producer, because I'm able to flip between all the different things the team is doing and have that like wide understanding of all of it that keeps me engaged, you know? And that kind of expands out to the whole rest of the team as well. So Iz is our community manager, but they're also our UI specialist. They do like sort of all of the HUD design, the menu design, that kind of thing. And that involves concept work as well. So recently, like this month, they've sat down and come to me and gone like, hey, I want to do some more concept work. Can I? And I've sat there and gone, well, okay, Zach, you're doing character work for the new world we're developing. Any chance you could do with a hand in making a few more designs? And they said yes. And so now is doing like a bit of character design work on the side. And that goes across the whole thing. So Jake's done some coding. He's done some modeling as well. Beth has done some like VFX stuff and materials things. Louis done a bit of everything. So long as the communication in the team is good and people understand who has the like hit the button final call on any given issue, it actually frees people up to essentially do whatever they'd like, because at the end of the day, that structure and authority is clear and designated. So people can experiment and kind of go outside of their comfort zones and their sort of specialisms essentially just whenever they'd like, really. And that is something that's worked for us. It's different in a lot of other places, but the short answer is no, I wouldn't, especially in an indie team. There's a reason that AAA teams are hundreds and hundreds of people. There's a lot of different things that go into games design, and you're never gonna end up being able to just nail yourself down to one box. Indie is kind of a space for people who want to do a whole bunch of different things at once. So yeah, I wouldn't kind of box yourself in like that. Just do whatever you'd like. And also, yeah, 5,000 followers on, I'm assuming, like sort of Discord, Instagram type of thing. That's pretty decent. That's nothing to sniff at. Chase that.
No, I meant like interests, not
Oh,
like lots
okay.
of interests.
Gotcha. Yeah. In a game you're working on, or?
Just in general, you know, just like
Okay.
I get really bored if I have to do the same thing all the time.
Oh,
I have to do
5,000
lots of
interests. I see.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
well,
what
in
I
that
meant.
case, no, I'm still here for that because, yeah, same. Yeah, no, like, don't nail yourself down to one thing. It is, for me, just the death of all motivation to do so. And good news is that you're in basically the perfect space for it. So, yeah. I think that's that. Anything else?
That's it.
I've
Oh,
got a question for you.
Gotcha.
Since you've obviously got now roughly over a year's experience of what you're doing, is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now, and
Good
how would you add that, say, to your the project now or future projects?
Okay, so yes, there's like a million different things that I would change, and probably most of them I'm not even aware of. The big one I go to is that the whole team, I love them to bits. They're amazing people that are my friends and my colleagues, and I am the luckiest bastard alive to be around them every day and be able to work with such incredibly skilled people. However, there's also 8 of us, which is an issue because that's big for an indie team. And that like strong personal connection has been one of our biggest strengths. But it also means that in terms of like, it means that the team's really solid, which in certain circles could be seen as a disadvantage, in the sense of like, for example, the like UK Games Fund is built for team sizes of about 3 to 5 ish, and a lot of other like publishers and studios will sort of go for teams around that size. But we were at university and we didn't have that like pressure to keep a team compact and small, and so we ended up just naturally settling into this bigger box that we found ourselves in, and became a really steadfast and solid team. Like everyone that started working on the project is still working on it a year and a bit later, which is nothing to sniff at, I'm aware of. But it also means that I kind of can't really see clearly a future where someone drops off the team or things change and that kind of stuff. It's something we've managed to make work so far, Like from the get-go, we've managed to get enough funding in and get enough support that we have brought everyone along for the ride the whole way through. And that's the plan moving forward. The plan is to keep that momentum, get enough funding, get enough publishers. But that is a risky thing. That is not something that I would advise people to do. And it's a situation that I am confident we can handle. But if I could choose, I wouldn't have to handle it. So from the start, keep your team small and think very carefully about who you want to bring in and let it naturally build as the project tells you what it needs. So one of the best decisions, for example, that we made, even as a team of 7 at the time, was bringing Jake in a month or 2 into the project, because he fit almost every gap that we had in the team at the time in terms of VFX knowledge, in terms of materials, in terms of animation. Like, that was the major person that we hired from a internal need that arose while working. And that's the kind of thing that I would advise you to chase. Beyond that, I mean, let me think. I guess sort of, this isn't necessarily something I'd change about the way we did it, but it's something I could have seen myself slipping up on very easily. It's really easy, especially in creative disciplines, to just see the work and just see kind of what you are making in front of you. But my advice is, if you're going to do this as a job, if you're going to do this professionally, you need to see it as something bigger than that. You need to look for grants and look for funding opportunities and apply for showcases and like do all of these things external to the project that allow it to go on. A great example of that is social media, like we were discussing earlier. It's something that is an unfortunate necessity of the kind of world we live in if you want to get people interested in a thing you're doing. But the mentality that helps me is that every single action there, every single thing done, goes towards fueling that vision and fueling that project that otherwise wouldn't exist. So keep in mind that balance and let the team and the project grow organically from something small are my 2 biggest pieces of advice. The other thing I would say as well is, I'm going to grab you guys a link real quick. So there is a newsletter that I am subscribed to, which is, let's go this one. The subscription link to it just looks like a scam, which is utterly hilarious. But I'll stream my screen real quick to show you guys what I'm on about. Ta-da! So it's run by a guy. What is this? So it's run by a guy called Colin McDonald. He is one of the higher ups at the UK Games Fund. And it's a newsletter that goes out every month, which is basically just a really compact summary of all of the interesting and useful resources that are going on within the game space. So, for example, funding. This is grants and like sort of money that can be drawn on. It goes on and on and on. We've got jobs, we've got reports, awards that you can sign up for, events that you can go to, showcases that you can get yourself on. Like all of these accelerators as well. Maybe Acceler will be on there one day, who knows? But all of these like incredibly useful resources compacted into a single email that goes out every month. This is the single most useful thing that I found while I was working, like from the start. I'm assuming that's good. How do I... Maybe I need to go back here. Let's do, there we go. Yeah, that resource I found sort of in March-ish, and it's the thing that drove us forward. It's how we discovered Transfuser. It's how we discovered basically every useful thing we've gone on to. And every month nowadays, that newsletter comes in, I sit down, I go through the whole thing, and I send off applications to everything that I might consider useful. Do the same thing. It's a great way of putting in those external events that I mentioned in the talk that keep that motivation going and keep you wanting to do this for a reason other than your own motivation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I think we're running a little short on time, but that was so insightful. I think we all learned quite a bit with that, with your experiences. So yeah, thanks a lot for doing that.
I'm glad.
So yeah, I think I'm gonna stop recording at this point. So yeah, thanks again.
Not a problem. And I just want to emphasize real quick before everything packs up, the whole thing of be annoying. If any of you guys see me at any given point, come bug me, and anyone else on the team. You're all more than welcome to, and I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. This talk isn't the end of all of this kind of thing. This is an opening that you can use for a new connection in the industry. So go for it.
Thank you.
I like all the